Does Shadowdark's Ras-Godai class make the thief obsolete? Find out today on Runeforged. Hey folks, I'm William. This is Runeforged. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at the Ras-Godai class, aka the Desert Ninja, from Shadowdark's Red Sands supplement. Be sure to stick around to the end of the video where I give my final thoughts on the Ras-Godai class, including whether or not it makes Shadowdark's Thief class completely obsolete. Alright, so I've got the Ras-Godai rules pulled up here. And I've got to say, I am pretty excited about this class. I'm a big fan of ninjas in general, and I'm really excited to see what this iteration of that type of class looks like. Alright, so it says, black-clad assassins who train from childhood inside a hidden desert monastery. They gain their sorceress powers from a legendary black lotus flower that was given to them by a demon. Yeah, this is so sick. I love everything about this. We've got all the major beats here. We've got shadowy assassins. There's a little bit of monastic flavor here. And we've also got some ninja adjacent, like magical / supernatural powers. And to top it all off, we've got a magical black lotus flower, which was given to them by some sort of demonic entity. Very, very cool. All right, moving on here to look at the weapons. Looks like they can use blowgun, bolas, dagger, razor chain, scimitar, shuriken, and spear. I think this is great. I think we hit most of, if not all, of the classic ninja weapons. I think as long as we've got some sort of ninja-like sword, which I think you can replicate close enough with the scimitar, and you have the blowgun, the shuriken, some sort of dagger, and the razor chain, which is, I guess, kind of their analog to, I think it's called like a kusarigama. I think that's right. It's like the blade that's kind of attached to the chain. I think as long as you've got those weapons, I think you pretty much got your bases covered in terms of classic ninja weapons. I will say that the spear feels a little bit out of place, not because I don't think ninjas use spears, but because in the Shadowdark rules, I don't think the spear is a finesse weapon, and I very much see the Ras-Godai as a dexterity-based class. So I'm curious to see, I'd be curious to know why the spear was included in this list, or maybe I need to go back and check to make sure that it's not a finesse weapon. But either way, it just seems a little bit unusual, given that everything else is very classically ninja, and also more of a dexterity-based weapon, either finesse for melee or just like a standard range weapon. So pretty good. I'm a fan of the weapons overall. In terms of the armor, it looks like they can use leather. I think that's totally fine. Although I wouldn't have been upset to see that they couldn't use any armor at all. I classically think of ninjas as not really wearing armor, and it may have been a good point of balance when you're trying to think about how this class might differentiate itself from the thief class, which I think is probably its closest analog. All right, moving on here, looking at hit points, 1d6 per level. 1d6 per level. Interesting. So I'm pretty sure that the thief only has 1d4. So I'm surprised to see that this class actually gets more hit points on average than the thief does, since they are, in my mind at least, very, very similar classes that serve a similar function. I think this is fine from like a narrative standpoint. Like it could be the case that their additional like physical training, or the fact that they've consumed this black lotus flower in some way gives them hardier bodies than what your standard thief might have. So I think it's totally fine from that standpoint. So yeah, I guess I'm curious to see what advantages the thief has over the Ras-Godai class that would justify them being able to wear the same types of armor, more or less. I think the thief can also wear like Mithril chain, which is an improvement, but also for the Ras-Godai to have slightly more hit points than the thief does. So curious to see what that looks like. In terms of languages, the Ras-Godai knows Diabolic. That seems very cool and thematic. I have no issues with that. All right, now we're coming into the real like meat and potatoes of the class. All right, so this is the Assassin trait. You have advantage on checks to sneak and hide. Fantastic. And your attacks deal double damage against targets that are unaware of your presence. Huh. That's actually really interesting, because I'm pretty sure this is a slightly different wording than what you see on the Thief's backstab ability. This one says unaware of your presence, where I'm pretty sure the Thief says unaware of your attack. So if that is the case, it feels like it'd be much more difficult to get off an assassin attack as opposed to a backstab, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I think thematically that kind of makes sense. But what is curious to me, it says your attacks deal double damage against targets that are unaware of your presence. I'm pretty sure that double damage roughly equates to what you see with a first level backstab, and the backstab continues to improve over multiple different levels, and this ability does not seem to do that. Maybe there's some buffs to it in the talent section, but right off the bat, just like the core like base ability, this ability actually seems substantially weaker than the Thief's Backstab ability, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly how I feel about that. But we'll keep reading. Maybe there's more context that we're missing. All right, the next ability here is called Smoke Step. 3 times a day, teleport to a location you can see within near. This does not use your action. Very cool. I love everything about this. I think this is very cool and thematic. It's right on brand for a ninja type of class, especially one with more of a mystical or magical origin. I will say that I don't think it would have been crazy if the last line just wasn't there and it did end up being used as part of your movement action. It definitely wouldn't have been quite as powerful because the way that it's worded right now is you can use your move and then dash and then use this teleport to go like another 30 feet. So I guess you could move like 90 feet and around. Or I guess maybe even more than that if you decided that you could use multiple smoke steps on the same turn. Like, could you use all three at the same time? I don't know. But regardless of whether you can or can't, you can actually cover an immense amount of distance in just one turn with the use of a dash plus a smoke step. So that's really interesting. All right, Black Lotus. You earned the right to eat a petal of the fabled Black Lotus flower, and you survived its sorcerous effects. Roll 1 talent on the Black Lotus talents table. Okay, cool. I mean, I don't know exactly what the implication of that is, but it sounds very cool and thematic, so I'm on board. All right, scrolling down to the Ras-Godai Talents here. Let's see what we've got. This first one is you are trained in the use of poisons. See page 27. Okay. All right, so I did a quick read ahead on the poisons here, and basically what this lets you do is mix a poison in such a way that you are much less likely to harm yourself while you're mixing it. So like the default check in order to mix a poison is a DC 12 dexterity check. And if you fail that check, you have the effect of that poison applied to you. But if someone has the poisoner ability that we just talked about earlier and is therefore a trained user of mixing poisons, they actually only apply that negative effect to themselves on a natural one when they roll that check. So pretty cool. I actually like that quite a bit. I like the fact that anybody could potentially mix a poison, but people who are trained to do so are, less likely to harm themselves while they attempt to do that. So I think that's a good compromise, and I think this is a very solid talent. All right, roll an additional talent on the Black Lotus talents table. Okay, we don't know exactly what that means yet, but I'm assuming that's a pretty good thing. +2 to strength or dexterity stat, or +1 to melee attacks. That's really interesting. So this is, again, so we talked a bit about how the spear was maybe a bit of an odd inclusion on the Ras-Godai weapon list, but here it is actually showing that maybe strength is one of the possible primary stats for the class, and that's not something that I would have envisioned for kind of a ninja type character. But I don't think there's anything wrong with it. So yeah, you can do either strength or dexterity, and you can choose which way you want to go with that. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. All right, an additional usage of the smoke step talent. Yep, makes sense to me. And then the standard choose a talent or +2 to stats. Cool. These talents seem perfectly serviceable to me. I think a lot of it's going to come down to how cool and impactful these Black Lotus talents are. So let's go ahead and let's get into that. All right, gain 2 Black Lotus talents, reroll further ones. Okay. Once a day, paralyze a target of level 9 or less for 1d4 rounds when you damage it with a weapon. Yeah, this is very cool. I like this a lot. I think this is kind of feeding into the more magical or mystical side of like the mythic ninja, and I think that's right on brand. You can also like maybe this could also be maybe like a poison themed kind of ability if you didn't want to make it like magical in nature. But regardless, I think that's very cool and thematic and right on brand for a ninja type character. So no complaints. Advantage on dexterity checks to avoid entrapment or injury. Makes sense. You gain +1 to your AC when wielding a melee weapon in each hand. Interesting. Okay, so I don't think there is any other sort of dual wielding in Shadowdark, but this is a really interesting way to like kind of give a nod to the dual wielding feature without breaking one of the core tenets of the game, which is that for the most part, each character only gets one attack on its turn. Okay, you gain triple damage with your Assassinate talent. Okay, I mean, that does make it a little bit better, but still a little bit underwhelming maybe compared to Backstab. Let's see, when enemies you can see make a morale check, the DC is 18 instead of 15. Interesting. That seems pretty situational. I don't hate it, but it is a little bit of a strange inclusion, I think. Yeah, I wonder if this is just like kind of indicating that the Ras-Godai has some sort of like fearful or terrifying presence about them, um, and that might be, what tips the edge into making enemies run away from them during the middle of combat. Interesting. All right, once a day you can walk on water as if it were solid from 1d4 rounds. Again, this one seems pretty situational. It's a cool ability, and I think it makes a lot of sense for like kind of a ninja character. But I think personally, I might be a little bit disappointed if I got this one as opposed to some of the other ones. And if I was a GM of a player who rolled this, I feel like I would feel obligated to create scenarios where this might be useful. Yeah, overall, I'm not a huge fan of this one. Even though I do think it's cool and thematic, I think it would be a lot cooler if Ras-Godai just kind of had this ability standard and wasn't something that they had to roll on their Black Lotus talent chart. It doesn't seem nearly as good as some of the other ones are. So, meh. All right. Once a day, choose a living creature level 5 or less you can see within near. It must pass a DC 15 con check or fall asleep. Yep, very cool. I do imagine ninjas having the ability to put people to sleep with some sort of mystical or magical power. So I think that's very on brand. No complaints about that. All right, you can walk on sheer surfaces such as walls for 1d4 rounds. Yep, again, this one's also a little bit situational, but I think it has much more practical application than being able to walk on water. So, and it is also very much on theme for ninjas who are very good climbers in general. So I think I'm okay with this. You deal +1 damage with melee weapons. Okay, I like that. Yep, seems fine. Once a day, choose a creature of level 9 or less you can see. It must pass a DC 15 Whiz check, or it can't see or hear you for 1d4 rounds. Interesting. I feel like there are some pretty serious implications when this is used. I wonder, they can't see or hear you. I guess it's just kind of up to GM Fiat whether or not that means that your presence is known to them. If it means that you can just assassinate at will for 1d4 rounds, that's absolutely insane. But regardless, it is still a very cool ability. It's kind of like you're convincing the target that you're not there anymore. Or I mean, I guess it could just be it's just like you're pretty much completely invisible to them, which I guess is another interpretation of it. But yeah, and also goes up to level 9. Yeah, this is pretty cool. I feel like there are implications to this ability that I'm not fully understanding, and I feel like it's definitely one of those abilities that you'd have to see at the table in order to really understand. And it's also probably one that has quite a bit of GM fiat attached to it. But overall, it's a very, very cool ability. It seems thematic, and it seems like it can be very, very powerful with some with a creative mindset. So I think that's pretty cool. Overall, I think the Black Lotus talents are very cool and thematic. Some of them seem very situational, maybe a little too situational, but overall I do really like the list here, and I think it goes a long way towards playing into the class fantasy of this sort of more magical or mystical nature of the ninja type archetype. So overall, I think these are pretty solid. Okay, so now that we've had a chance to read through the Ras-Godai class rules, how does this class stack up against the Thief? Well, I'll tell you that right after a little bit of shameless self-promotion. If you're enjoying this discussion on the Ras-Godai class, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. I will be doing more videos like this in the future, so be sure to keep an eye out for those. All right, so let's get back to business. Earlier in the video, I presented the question, does the Ras-Godai class make the Thief obsolete? And the answer to that, no, not even close. If anything, it's the other way around. Despite the fact that the Ras-Godai has a larger HP die, access to more exotic weapons, including finesse weapons that do d6 damage, and potentially more magic adjacent utility via the Black Lotus talents, the Thief actually has a couple very distinct advantages over the Ras-Godai. The first is that the Thief is still very much the master of skills in this game. They have advantage on climbing, disguises, finding and disabling traps, and other delicate tasks like picking pockets and opening locks. And unfortunately, I can't find any mention of these things in the Ras-Godai class rules. And from a class fantasy perspective, it does kind of feel like the Ras-Godai should be able to do these things on roughly the same level as a Thief. One, I do understand that some effort does need to be made to balance the different classes against one another. But it also dawns on me that because the Ras-Godai have access to these more magical or sorcerous powers through the Black Lotus flower, it's possible that they never cultivated these mundane thieving skills to the same level as a more mundane thief. For example, they probably never had to cultivate their climbing skills because 3 times per day they can just teleport to a location that they can see within a short distance. So maybe that's the angle that was being taken when the class was designed. But perhaps a lot more importantly than the skills aspect of these classes, it seems to me that the Thief's backstab ability is just straight up better than the Ras-Godai's Assassin trait. So first of all, based on the wording, it does seem like it's much easier for the Thief to land a backstab than for the Ras-Godai to assassinate a target. And second, once the backstab does land, it is likely going to do significantly more damage than the assassinate. There may be a little bit of debate at early levels where the numbers may be a little bit closer or maybe even skew in the Ras-Godai's favor just a little bit. But after the Thief gets a few levels on them and their backstab ability starts to level up the damage that it does, you'll notice that the Thief quickly starts to outdamage the Ras-Godai by a massive margin. And in my mind, this doesn't really make sense from a mechanical perspective. Since the Assassinate ability does seem harder to land in the first place, it only makes sense to me that that ability should do more damage than the backstab ability. I'd actually like to see both of these abilities scale with level, but with the assassin ability doing more damage than backstab, simply because of how much harder it is to land in a fight. But I'm curious to hear what you think. Do you like the Ras-Godai class as is, or will you be making tweaks to it in your own games? I'm also curious to know how you feel like it stacks up against the Thief class, and whether or not you would make any changes to balance these two classes or to further distinguish them from one another. But despite all of that, I will say I do really enjoy the Ras-Godai class. I think from a thematic standpoint, it hits all of the beats that I was looking for. It is a shadowy assassin who wields exotic weapons and has ninja-related supernatural powers. Mechanically, I also think the class is pretty solid, though I do think the assassin ability should do more damage than it does currently. And I also wonder if the Ras-Godai should have some of the skill-related abilities that the Thief currently has. But overall, I think these are really mostly nitpicks, and the Ras-Godai is still very much a fun and interesting class. If you've enjoyed these first impressions, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and checking out this next Shadowdark related video. That's it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful day. Bye.